This might be a controversial video, but I believe you should train more like Sean Strickland, and here is why. Sparring is the only training that he is apparently doing. Now, when you look at this at face value, it sounds fucking stupid, but the results are undeniable. He is now the UFC middleweight champion, and there are things that you can learn and take from his training that you can use in your own. Now, I'm not saying for you to go spar 100% every single session, but I'm gonna take away some training tidbits from that and how you can apply it to yours. But why is it so effective to be sparring so often? It comes down to training methodology. Now, I highly advise you, if you listen to the podcast, even if you don't listen to the podcast, you should listen to these episodes. Go check out John Mackey's second episode and also Scott Sevwaite. Both of those episodes cover what I'm gonna talk about, and that is the dynamical systems theory or constraint-led approach to training. Now, typically when we're talking about dynamical systems theory or constraints-led approach, we're looking at modifying one of three or multiple of these three different parts of training. You're looking at individual constraints, you're looking at environmental constraints, and you're looking at task constraints. And the idea is that as an athlete, you're able to figure out how to solve the problem yourself without someone telling you what to do. It is figuring out the problem that is in front of you and finding the solution through your toolbox. And your toolbox can be a myriad of techniques that you've practiced in training. It is why in my mental toughness video, I've talked about why mental toughness isn't really a thing and you can't really develop it from hard training. It is about being completely prepared for the task at hand, and that would be competition and knowing what to do and have seen and have practiced every situation possible, which kind of comes back to this constraint-led approach. Now, Sean Strickland spars every day. He sees a million scenarios over and over again, and he has figured out what to do in every situation for him to come out on top and be successful. This only comes from being in these situations often. You get in the situation first time, doesn't work, okay, you try something else, and you try something else. The goal is to fail. The goal is to fail in these scenarios so you can figure out the solution to that problem. For example, just a very quick, easy example. For example, if you are a grappler, you're in bottom mount, someone takes your arm, what is the solution there? If you push like a white belt and you push your arms up to try and push their chest and push the opponent off you, you know that's going to lead to an armbar. You don't do that again anymore. You find another solution. That's just a very crude example. But this is what I believe makes Sean Strickland such a good MMA fighter and such a good striker, is because he has seen so many different scenarios from so many different opponents that nothing is really a surprise anymore. He is prepared for whatever is coming at him, as we can see from his latest fight. So how do we incorporate such an approach to your own training? Now, again, I don't advise you going to go spar 100% regardless if it's grappling, MMA, or striking. 100% rolling or sparring is going to set you up for burnout and injury even in the short term, depending on how hard you're going. So the goal is to vary the way you spar and roll, or create scenarios and situations for yourself, or maybe your coach creates for you, to be able to figure out and solve the problem from. So you can either change your individual constraint, you can change the task constraint, or you can change the environmental constraint. Now, obviously, let's start with the environment. The environment's a very simple one. Smaller or bigger rings. That's going to impact, more or less action, more or less movement. That's a constraint. Not every ring, octagon, mat space is the same size when you go and compete, unless maybe you're in one specific regulated organization. So having different sizes is going to help you fight different styles while being able to work on different things within those smaller constraints. It's going to change the way that you play the sport. Now, an individual constraint might be something genetic, an injury or something like that, so we don't need to worry about that one. But we need to move to the task constraints, which I believe is where you can really be creative and change the way you do your training. Now, regarding sparring with a task constraint, there's a lot you can do around changing or modifying the rules and the tasks you're doing. So let's take, for example, striking. Striking, you might be only throwing a jab in these rounds. You might be only moving a certain way. You might only be moving backwards. You might only be in the corner and you have to fight your way out of the corner. You might play with tempo. So for example, you can only throw punches at a certain tempo. So it's almost like slow motion fighting. These are things you can do. I mean, you can even do flow. If you search flow sparring, I think Muay Thai does it best when you see those and you just kind of see just reactions to certain movements. that is something that you can do, and flow sparring is another way you can add a task constraint to your sparring. That means that you're not always going 100% with your sparring, and it means you can do it often, you can be exposed to the situation scenarios often, and you can problem solve often, and that is what you want to do as a fighter, or any athlete really, but as a fighter, you want to be able to solve the problem that's in front of you. What is this person presenting you, and how can you defeat it? For MMA, you might be doing only fence, getting out of the fence position or fence wrestling, might be just standing up from the bottom position. I mean, you can obviously add everything else that I just talked about in striking into the MMA portion. For grapplers, it might be just escaping certain positions. It might be flow rolling, flow wrestling. These are all task constraints that you can use. It could be that you're not allowed to pass, you can only submit. It could be you can only submit, you're not allowed to pass. These are little constraints that you can create around there to force whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're trying to work on your finishes in a certain position, maybe you can make it you're not allowed to pass and you have to submit. It could be vice versa if you're looking more to develop a pressure game, as an example, and using submissions to pass. These are just all creative things that you can add to your training that aren't going to beat you up long term. I've mentioned about solving the problem as the reason that this approach to training is so successful. But there's more to it than just solving problems. It's about ingraining good technique, whatever you want to call good technique. Now, just as an example, for example, if you're throwing a jab, you want to throw it straight down. You don't want to have elbows flared or any other things going on there. The goal with having a constraint is that you have to throw the certain punch or technique with these things in place. So if you're just practicing a jab against a bag or pads, there's nothing else going on to change that technique. You're gonna throw it straight down the middle every time, hit the bag or pad, cool. Then you suddenly put in front of an opponent, something moves, someone moves one way, another way, and suddenly it goes out the door. You're now throwing a jab with quote unquote poor technique. Now, the problem is now you've introduced something into the picture that is creating, you could say, instability within the movement. And the goal is you want to ingrain the movements within a technique that are important to that technique. So regardless of what's happening, these things are happening. So for example, the technical terms are attractor and fluctuator. So the attractors of, say, throwing a punch, maybe turning the hip, maybe throwing it straight, etc., depending on the punch. Now you want those things to happen regardless of what is happening in front of you. Obviously you might have different tools for different situations, but just as a crude example. So you're gonna throw a jab this way in all these different scenarios. The fluctuator are the different scenarios. It could be an opponent going backwards, it could be an opponent slipping a punch, it could be an opponent throwing a punch. These are different things that are going to be presented to you so you can deepen this attractor well, deepen the technique ingrained within you so you can throw good technique regardless of what is happening. And that is the idea behind the constraints-led or dynamical systems theory approach in a very small nutshell. It doesn't go into everything, but that's kind of an overview of it. And that is why sparring often, like Sean Strickland does, is so effective. Just don't do it 100% all the time. One, you don't want brain damage. Two, you physically just can't, well, if he does do it, kudos to him, but physically handling 100% sparring all the time, yeah. If you're a ranked beginner, may not be the best idea. You just need some of the tools to go in and have more, start with different scenarios. Because if you're gonna get overwhelmed if you go straight into sparring like this because you don't know, we don't have the tools to answer these solutions, right? So the idea is developing the tools so you can implement these tools or call on these tools in different situations to figure out the puzzle that's in front of you. If you like the style of just me sitting here talking to you about different topics of video, please let me know down in the comments. Honestly, it'll save me on editing if you do like the style. So let me know down in the comments. This kind of style of video is something that you like to watch or listen to. I can ramble and rant on a bunch of different things. If this is the way, it's a lot easier for me to make videos for you like this versus trying to produce something highly edited. But let me know down in the comments and I'll see you in the next video.